right. Okay. There's a bit of a pause there for it starting. Right. So we're on lesson 6 now then, everyone. And we've been looking at music. We've been looking at Picasso. We've been looking at different styles of artists. So we're going to carry on with the work we've been doing, because the work we've been doing where we've put images of musical instruments on top of each other and then been inspired by an artist who uses this kind of spotlight effect on their work. We've been inspired by that. So it's taken quite a while to paint these things. So we're going to be carrying on with that work today. And I'll show you where I got to last time. I didn't manage to do any today because I was busy talking to everyone at Rawn's. So I'll be carrying on from where I left off before. So a few people as well had a little bit of difficulty with the paint because, first of all, one was using the paint in a very thin way and found it difficult to get the contrast and the solidity of the picture or paint, or the opacity. And another person was trying to paint flat colour but found that a little bit difficult. So I might just go through a little bit of that again, and perhaps if anyone wants me to talk about blending once more. Now the next thing I'm hoping to do is that we've painted musical instruments, we've explored abstraction in a way, and Picasso and such. What I'd like to do next is start to look at including people playing musical instruments in our work. And one of the things I really love to do is collage as well. So I'm looking forward to doing perhaps a little bit of collage, and maybe then bringing in a few other things, mixing that up a little bit as well. But we'll see how we get on. I'm going to talk about the artist that I've been inspired by for this. A famous or quite, well, let's say well-known portrait artist. So I'll go over to the board or to the wall, and we'll have a look at that before we go over to the studio. Right. Here we go. Right. So the artist is called Patrick Bremner. Okay, and he uses magazines and things like that to create his artwork. And there's an example. There's a few examples on my screen here. This is one of them. He does exclusively do portraits, but I thought because we've been looking a lot at these angles and shapes and showing perhaps movement and energy within our work, I thought that his work was quite interesting in that respect, particularly because he's using magazines to break up the shapes in his portraits. So I thought maybe we could go along the lines of looking at some of this stuff in our work next. Oh, someone's arrived. I think it's Nina. Let's get on. There we go. There. Right. Here's another one that is also really interesting. You can see more of the influence of the magazines on here. Although what I'm hoping to do is perhaps I'm going to dye some papers as well as use magazines. I don't have many magazines here. I could get some. But if you've got any old magazines that you'd like to use for the next part of our work, then bring those along with some PVA glue. So that we can explore that. Having said that, we can. I'll also, in this class, I will make some papers that can be used for collage as well, and explain how I perhaps tackle it as well. But I've got a little video, so I'm hoping this will work. I've got a little video of this artist creating his pieces. So the materials he uses, as I said, is magazines, but he also uses paper from old books and other printed media. He often uses source materials that have a personal or thematic relevance to the subject of his artwork as well. So he begins by sketching out the basic outline of his subjects on a canvas or a board. Then meticulously tears and cuts and arranges the pieces of paper to build up the image. And you'll see him working at high speed in a few moments, actually making one of his portraits. And they're quite contemporary because they have a lot of depth and texture and detail as well, and subtle gradations of colour, but also really, because they're from magazines, he has these really lovely, vibrant and interesting colours in his work as well. So it's really quite, for me, it's a really inspiring thing to look at, and I hope that you find it interesting as well. Some of the things he particularly likes to look at is identity, emotion, and the human experience. And he's interested in how different fragments of paper from experiences come together to form a whole. Okay, so I'm going to see if I can play this video for you about this artist, and you'll get an idea perhaps of how he tackles his stuff. So let's go. So you can't really see his drawing on here, but I think he's working on a canvas, and I would say he's definitely got a drawing there, but he's gradually, you can see how the colours and the layers change. And the nice thing about this, it's a bit like acrylic, is that you can work back over it very easily. And there goes some of these dynamic shapes that I was talking about, very much like Cubism and Picasso perhaps, only different of course. All done with printed materials put together to make this really cool piece. So I'm hoping that we can do that with some of the musical subject matter that we've got. So it could be really exciting. Then we may draw back into things and paint into it as well. Wonderful. All right, so I'll just switch that off and we'll go over to back over to the studio, to my desk, where I haven't put the camera on. There we go. Let's see if I get that on. There we go. Right. So yeah, so that's what I'm hoping to do next. So I'm going to carry on working on this. I may stop at some point and start drawing out one of the characters that I've selected. For some reason, I've chosen work that looks very much like I just like doing people with saxophones. So quite a few saxophone players here. I've also got this guy, but for some reason I kind of must have been attracted to this because I put all these on the drive. Oh, there we go. There's a lady playing a string instrument. But I've got all these saxophone players. I've got this kind of weird one here as well. A one-man band, another saxophone player, man looking through his instrument, and again more of these kind of saxophone pictures. So I'm hoping this evening that I'll do a bit more on this piece. I may not finish it though, and then perhaps I will start sketching out one of these images ready to start collaging or working into next. But if you find that you've finished doing this, the next thing I'd like you to do is get hold of an image. So these are all on the art class drive, and there's more as well. Choose a picture to start drawing, and you can use the grid technique that we've been using previously to do this if you want to, or like I'm planning to do, is do kind of a sketch of it freehand. But I'll talk a bit more about that later. Okay, So now if you want to create a more of a flat colour, I'm going to turn this around on the side. If you want to create more of a flat palette of colour, thing to do is to use, first of all, the right brush. So a flat brush is ideal for creating flatter colour, if you like, because it's almost, I always think of it a little bit as like using a kind of a marker pen, if you like, because you've got the flat end. This is actually more of a filbert because it's got a rounded end to it, but using a brush a bit more like with this flat area allows you to create this more flat colour, if you like. So I'm going to grab a little bit of this blue. So if you use plenty of paint on your brush, and when you get your water, you only need really to put the end of your brush into the water, just the tip. So you're not putting on very much at all, and that allows you plenty more control around how you use your paint. Okay, because if you've got too much water, it's going to be more translucent straight away. If that's what you want, that's fine. But also, the water is going to mean that perhaps unless you mix the paint properly on the palette, so you've got a bit of water on there, squirrel the brush, or I always call it squirrel the brush around on the palette until the water and the paint are fully mixed, so that you haven't got loose water on your brush, you've got paint that's been mixed with water on there. So mix it nicely. Now during the process of using your paints, you're probably going to need at some point to add a bit more water, so you do it in exactly the same way. You blend it with the water after you dip the very tip of the brush in, and then see, this is already going a bit dry because it's acrylic, so I'll just go over here and mix it up a bit. So yep, what was that? And then you can go in two different directions. Look, so I'm just going across with the flat part of the brush and going back the other way to create a nice even flat area of colour like that. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that because somebody had a bit of difficulty with it earlier today, and it really helped that I did a little bit more of a demonstration. Now some of the paint, of course, is naturally a bit translucent, so you may need to go over it a couple of times, and as I've said in previous lessons, if you add just a touch of titanium white into the colour, it becomes more solid, and then even if it's a bit too light, you've made this opaque colour, and then you can add the full colour back over the top later to bring it back to life a little bit more if you want. Change the hue and make it a bit more dark. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that, just to remind you perhaps even that using the proper brush to make flat areas of colour and even blending is really important, so that then you can control the paint better and create these nice blends as well. So I'm going to do a blend here. So while the paint is wet, look, I've put the bit of paint just there. It's the same colour as the background really. And then while it's wet, I'm gradually using the flat of the brush to work back into the colour. And I can create a nice even blend. There's a bit of light on that moment, but there you go. That. All right, so I thought I'd show you that. So anyway, what I'm going to do this evening is I'm going to be working a little bit on this one. So let's zoom back out again. There we go. Yeah, so it's quite focused. Okay, so as you can see on this picture, and I talked about this a lot last time, is I have used an orangey sort of yellowy brown through the middle, and then I've gone for blues in the background. And I was quite pleased how this worked, because we've got lovely these nice subtle sort of mono chromatic colours in here, and the same almost like monochromatic here as well. So we've got, you know, mostly yellows and oranges here. So the contrast on say a colour wheel would be the opposite. So those colours are going to stand out really nicely next to each other. And then you can add in, which is another thing I did, is add in some accents of colour as well. So whereas we've got similar colours all the way through here, this little area down here, I've added, it's almost gone kind of a pinky sort of colour around here as well. So I just changed the colours a little bit, and those little subtle changes can draw your attention to certain areas or just make it a bit more interesting as well. So do try out, you know, experimenting with colour, but when, you know, stick to the same colour scheme, but just try some extra little bits in places that are harmonious. So in other words, there's similar colours to what you've already got, but you're just bringing in something slightly different in some places as well. Okay, but it's been a lot of fun doing this one, so I hope everyone else is enjoying it, and we should have a lot of fun with the next stuff that's coming up as well with collage for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, right, so I hope you've enjoyed listening to that, and I hope you like Patrick Bremer as well. I'll bring in some more artists, of course. I seem to be doing that every week this term, but it's good fun. Okay, good. So does anyone want to share or tell me or show me or ask me any questions about what we're doing? Okay, so you'll see me working really quickly, obviously, because I've speeded it up. You'll see me working really quickly through this. And I only get the top half of the picture done during the lesson. But you can see basically how I'm using the paint in multiple layers, making corrections and things as I go along, which is easy to do with acrylics because it dries so quickly. So we're building up the layers of colour, and we're using darker and lighter like hues and tones of paint or colour to create the three-dimensional effect of the top of this instrument. And this was me just discussing a little bit more about Patrick Bremer and a few other little bits and pieces whilst we're working. So we have a good chat while we're doing our pieces here. So I gradually work across the whole of this picture. The important thing with the higher and the lower ridges of this instrument is to make sure that there's contrast between the two. So one of the things that I noticed that a few people did was they painted their instruments more or less as sort of flat shapes and things like that. So that does draw attention to these areas. But there's always these opportunities to add extra detail in order to create an even more interesting picture. So the funnel there on the French horn, I've added there these sort of abstract reflective shapes with lots of blending and things. So a few people had painted these areas just as a single colour, almost just as a flat area of colour, whereas that might work for it being a nice shape. It's also important that if you're going to draw, I think sometimes anyway, if you're going to draw attention to a particular area of your picture, by having it a certain colour or shape, then adding in some extra detail into that area is also really important. So even if it's kind of abstract or a little bit different, but if it kind of expresses something about the object, or in this case the musical instrument, then you're going to create or draw attention to things for a very good reason, and then obviously make that object interesting to look at. So I gradually work my way around here, and I keep coming back to the curling bit of the instrument as I move down the painting. I wasn't quite happy with the overall shape of it, but I do make some corrections as I go along in order to just make it a little bit more interesting. So with opacity of your paint, you'll see just where my wrist is down there, where I've applied a blue colour, I've then applied another layer of colour. So the more paint you apply, the more opaque the colour is going to be. So if you want a nice solid colour, then don't be afraid to work back over it a few times. And as I've said before, you can mix it with more opaque colours, or indeed just a touch of white for your first layer. And then once you've got that first layer on and it's a little bit drier, then of course you can go in with a more purer colour from the tube or from your mixture that you've made on your palette. So I think the overall effect of this piece is really nice, and I really enjoyed doing it. I don't get to the end of this piece in this lesson, and indeed what I plan to do is move on to the next thing, so that everyone can see where they're going, because some people are a little bit further ahead than others, obviously, which always happens. So we'll be doing that. So even on, I'm just working on this key, I think it's called a key for tuning the strings, the instrument. You'll see that I put in a layer of white around the outside of that bit that I'm just working on, and then I applied the shadows back over the top. So you can put almost like an underpainting in areas, and then don't feel worried or panicked if it doesn't look quite right as soon as you put the paint on. The point is that you need to work at these things, because as you're doing it, you notice things. And I always say this, but you learn about the subject matter as you're painting. And we talked a bit about accents earlier on. You'll just see that I added a little bit more purple into that key that I was just discussing there on the right hand side. And I think, it might not be purple there, or well, it might not have anything different there, but I've added it in purely because I think it would be interesting and nice to look at. The same as I did with that little peachy pink colour that I mentioned earlier on in the lesson. So adding accents to a piece can really kind of spice it up and make it fascinating to look at for somebody, or just make them feel good when they look at your work. So I'm adding a few highlights to this as well. Now the other thing I haven't mentioned, of course, is that I am working from the original drawing that I did a few lessons ago. So I did this drawing where we overlapped the instruments. Well, this is probably about as far as I get with this piece. It's almost a shame I didn't finish it, but I'm pretty happy that I've kind of learnt these things and put this picture together. So I hope you've enjoyed doing this piece, and if you want any help or anything with it, then send us a message or get in contact, or just I'll see you in class and we can talk about it then. All right, have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye.